Fearful avoidant attachment style usually is the one where the most trauma is associated with. And that means you have a lot of trauma stored in your body. Um, while you also have this belief that you should just be able to do everything and to just feel normal and get over it and get yourself together, and that you feel like you're failing. And I really wish for you to know that what you are doing, and with that I mean just living normal day life and healing and going through this process, is so extremely I'm looking for the word, courageous. Is so extremely courageous, because it's definitely not easy to do normal things with a lot of trauma stored. So in this video, I just wanted to dive into 4 signs of trauma that you might think are just you, are part of your personality, and something you have to deal with for the rest of your life, that can make you feel like you're not enough, that you're failing, and that's just really, really, really not true. So I want you to be aware of these so that you can be kind and loving to yourself when you notice these. The first is being tired, being exhausted even, is definitely a sign of trauma stored in the body. So when you have a lot of trauma, you get triggered a lot, which happens when you haven't healed, so it's all just stored in there. That is so tiring for your system, for your body. It's like you have a really sluggish machine that just, it's so hard to go forward. And what makes this even harder is that a lot of fearful avoidants have this belief that they cannot be weak. Being weak is a reason to get judged, a reason to get abandoned. So while you're tired, you're still pushing yourself, possibly. And when you can't, when you just cannot do that, you feel guilty. So it's either pushing yourself and going over your own boundaries, or it's feeling guilty and feeling ashamed that you're not doing anything and that you're resting. I really want you to be aware of this, because being tired is so logical when you have trauma stored in your body. And the more you heal, and especially the more you release, the lighter you will feel, the more energy you will get back. This was one of the things that I really did not expect to happen when I started healing. I actually had a chronic fatigue syndrome, which was diagnosed, I think, about 10 or 11 years ago, when I was right in the middle of my crash state of the fearful avoidant attachment style. And I so well remember that I would come home and my room would be 2 flights of stairs up, when I was living with roommates during studying. And I would stand on the bottom of the first flight of stairs and look up and just cry and sit on the bottom step, because I just could not get up. I just didn't know how to get up that flight of stairs, because I was just so exhausted. And it kind of touches me, because looking back, I was like, oh my gosh, I was so harsh on myself for that. I just felt like I was failing. I felt like I had to keep up with everybody that was doing normal things, everybody that had so much energy, and I just felt so tired all the time. And I really did my best, but I was so harsh on myself. So I really hope that you can be kinder to yourself going through this process and being tired and being exhausted. So that tiredness, as I was healing, as I was releasing more and more trauma from my body, I got more and more energy. When you are tired, when you are exhausted, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with your body. It could just mean that there's so much repressed emotions and repressed trauma. And when you heal, the chances really are that this will get better. I want to say right about now, I'm not a medical doctor. Please do consult your physician. So just take this as my experience, and know that this possibly can be an explanation for your tiredness and exhaustion, and that it can possibly get better when you heal and release. So with releasing, what I did was the emotional freedom technique. I talk about that more on my channel. Tapping, which is a certain technique where you just tap on certain points, which looks weird but works wonders, because that's what really releases the trauma from your body. And every single time I released a big chunk, or I really worked through something, I got more energy. And it took me a while to notice that, but it just kept happening more and more and more. And that was just such a great gift in the whole healing process. So I really wish that for you too. So that was the first sign. The second sign is unrest in your body, and therefore keeping busy. That's a lot of times what we do when we feel that unrest in our body, when there's just like, it feels like there's just too much energy, but it's like a kind of antsy energy, which can coexist with being exhausted, and actually a lot of times happens to coexist. You tend to just keep busy, and this can definitely also be a sign of trauma stored in the body. And keeping busy is a way to not having to deal with that. When you sit down and really relax, that's possibly when the trauma comes up, waiting to be processed and waiting to be released. And it can be that that's too much in one moment, so it feels overwhelming when you really relax. But it can also just mean that you're scared, and that you don't have the tools, and you don't know how to heal that trauma. But unrest definitely can be a sign, which can also lead to anxiety, which kind of like is this vicious cycle then, that you have trauma and therefore you have all these negative beliefs, and then you have that unrest in your body, and that makes you anxious, so you have even more negative thoughts, and that just strengthens each other. But yeah, unrest is definitely a physical sign of trauma, can be a physical sign of trauma stored in the body. The third that I really didn't know is that when you have a lot of trauma stored in the body, you have a hard time regulating your temperature. So when I was in the middle of all this, I always was cold. I was always cold. I had the heater in my room on the highest, and I would still be cold. I would still have like 10 blankets and just be shivering just because I was so cold. And I really genuinely thought that this was just who I was, that this was a personality thing. I also remember that when I would go out, when it was winter time or like fall time, I could not have bare ankles or like bare wrists, because that would just be too cold, and I would just I would feel so much resistance doing things or going out with anything exposed to the air, because it was just too cold, and I would get really tired thinking about having to do that. And as I healed more and more, I realized that that was not the case anymore, that I could definitely regulate my own temperature, and not consciously, but like my body was just doing a much better job at it, because it wasn't lugging around so much trauma and being busy with that. That's kind of how I see it or saw it. And now I can go outside in very cold weather in like a t-shirt, which is, I mean, I would be cold, and I love like these knitted sweaters, but I could, and I would be fine, which I could not even fathom. I could not even imagine 10 or 12 years ago. Not that it has to take that long, but it's just we're 12 years after that point when I'm taping this video. So regulating your temperature definitely is also one of the signs of trauma stored in the body, difficulty with regulating your temperature. I'm very curious if you recognize any of these. Let me do the last one. So the last one is brain fog. Brain fog can actually also be a sign of trauma stored in the body. And this might sound weird, but it's logical in a way, because as long as you have brain fog, there's this fear brain logic that you can't make mistakes that you are accountable for if you're not thinking straight, or at least you'll have something to blame it on. So for a fearful avoidant, anything to do with power and responsibility is freaking scary and can be triggering. So even something simple as having a clear mind and being able to think straight can actually be quite scary, because if you make a mistake while thinking straight and having a clear mind, then you are fully accountable. And the fearful avoidant is so deathly afraid of making mistakes that you will do anything to not do that. So actually all this trauma around making mistakes can cause you to have brain fog, because it's protecting you in a way. Interesting, isn't it? So when I healed, this was also what I noticed, that I could just think clearly more and more and more. And as I could accept more and more personal power and responsibility, I had a more and more clear mind and could think more straight and could see more possibilities. And that is so great, because when you're in the crash state of the fearful avoidant attachment style, also this is kind of like a vicious cycle. You have this brain fog, you can't think straight. Sometimes it even just, you have these blackouts where you just can't think of anything. But you also can't see possibilities and solutions. It's very hard to see that when you're in the midst of all this and have so much trauma. So those are 4 signs. There's probably a lot more. These are just the 4 that I came up with for the last 2 weeks. And if you have any more, let me know in the comments below if you recognize any of these 4, and maybe you weren't aware that these were signs of trauma being stored in the body, and that you can actually heal these while healing your fearful avoidant attachment style. Let me know. I really want to know. And I think we can help each other also in the comments by just commenting what you recognize, and also what other signs of trauma you have, physical signs, any signs. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not weird. And a lot of the things that you experience right now, it could very, very well be that when you heal, when you start to heal, you'll notice that that gets less and less, and that eventually it will just dissipate. And you're like, oh, so this is how normal people do it, how other people do it. They have this amount of energy. Well, now I can handle life. And that's such a wonderful place to arrive at, and that is in your future. And I am so happy that that will be in your future. If you really want to heal this fearful avoidant attachment style and get there and release that trauma from your body, and you feel like you're ready, you can sign up for the wait list on my program, which will be all about healing the fearful avoidant attachment style. I will probably be developing it in the first quarter of next year, so 2022. And you will be the first to hear, to know, to get on board with an entry point price. So, yeah, let me know in the comments below which one of these you recognize and sign up for the wait list. You can find that link in the description below.